welcome to section 2.3. And in this video, we are going to learn how to add fractions without a common denominator. So in the previous section, we learned how to find the sum of two fractions, or how to add two fractions together when you have the same number in the denominator at the bottom. But this time, we are going to talk about how to do that when we don't have the same two numbers in the denominator. So with that being said, we are going to, let's walk through the steps first. So we want to find, the smallest number that can divide evenly into both numbers. That'll make more sense. Sorry, that making that confusing, but once I work through an example, it'll make more sense. So for step 2, we are going to multiply the denominator and numerator with whatever number we find that can divide evenly into these both numbers. And then once we do that, we're going to add the two numbers together and simplify. So with that being said, let's work on an example. Let's work on example 1. So we have 5/3 plus 3/5. So I'm going to write case 1 right here because we are going to run into two general cases when we are adding fractions. In case 1, in this case, we are going to multiply our denominators. So what I mean by that is we're just going to take 3 and 5 and multiply them together to find our common denominator, which is 15. So when we do that, to get 3 to 15, we have to multiply 3 5 times. So I'm going to show that we're multiplying 3 5 times, and then whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So we're going to bring that 5 and multiply 5 by 5 up here. And to get 5 to 15, we have to multiply it 3 times. So then whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. So we have 5 times 3, and then we're going to have 3 times 3 up here. So 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 3 is 15. And then we're going to add 3 times 3, which is 9, and 3 times 5, which is 15. Now, if you look, we have two fractions with a common denominator. And if you were to do the math, we didn't change the values of these fractions because we multiplied the top and the bottom by the same value. So this is basically what we're doing here. To get to a common denominator, we are taking a simplified version of a fraction and making it no longer simplified, so that way we can add these two together, if that makes sense. So we're basically doing inverse simplification. We are doing the opposite of what simplification is, which is dividing, because we're multiplying. So anyways, that's enough yapping. So 25 plus 9 is 34, and then we have that over 15. In this case, this can't be reduced anymore, so this is our answer, 34 over 15. Looking at example 2, this is when we're going to have case 2. And case 2, we divide denominator. So in this case, we have a 2 and a 4, and if you think about it, we can make a common denominator of 4 with these two numbers because 2 divides into 4 evenly. So, or we can do 2 times 2, which is 4. So in that case, because we want to get to 4, and for 2 to get to 4, we have to multiply it by 2. We're going to do that same to the top. And then here, we're just going to leave this fraction as is because it already has this common denominator of 4. So we're not going to mess with the values of this fraction. So 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. And then you're going to add that 3/4, keep it as is. And now these two fractions have a common denominator, so we're just going to add these two numerators together. So 3 plus 2 is 5, and we're just left with 5/4. And that's our answer. Looking at example 3, I encourage you to pause the video and think about whether or not we're going to have case 2 or case 1. And once you figure that out, I encourage you to actually evaluate this and get to the answer to see if you can get it correct. Assuming you have given it a try, for this one, we are going to follow the steps of case 1. Because we can't divide 3 evenly into 4, or we can't divide 4 evenly into 3. So in that case, we just multiply these two together. So we're going to take 3, multiply it by 4. 6, we're going to take 6 and multiply it by 4. 4, and then we're going to take 4 times 3, and then 1 times 3. So 4 times 6 is 24. 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 3 is 3. 4 times 3 is 12. We have a common denominator 12, so we can just add 24 and 3 together, and we get 27/12. Looking at example 4, and encourage you to pause the video and try this, and assuming you have given it a go. In this case, with these two fractions, we are going to be dealing with case 2, where we divide one of the denominators, or multiply one of the denominators to get to the common denominator. And in this case, our common denominator is going to be 8, because we can just simply take this 4 here and multiply by 2 to get to the 8. So we're going to multiply 4 by 2, and then whatever we drew to the bottom, we drew to the top, so we're going to multiply 8 by 2. 8 times 2 is 16. 2 times 4 is 8. We're going to take that 13/8, and because we have a common denominator of 8, we can just add 16 and 13, and that will get you 29. And then we're going to divide that by 8, and we can't reduce that, so that's our answer. Looking at example 5, we have 1 and 1/2, and plus 11/4. So in this case, before we actually start solving this, because we have this mixed number here, we are going to want to convert that into a fraction. So to do that, remember, we're going to multiply whatever number is in front with the denominator, and once we get that value, we're then going to take that value and add it to whatever's in the numerator. So we're going to have 1 times 2 plus 1/2 plus 11/4. So 1 times 2 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. So you're left with 3/2 plus 11/4. And in this case, if you think about it, to find a common denominator, we can multiply 2 by 2 to get to 4. So we're going to do that. And if you're wondering, that is case 2. So 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 2 is 4. And then we're going to keep that 11/4. We have common denominators, so we're going to add those. We're going to add the numerators together, which is 6 plus 11 is 17. We're going to put that over 4. Looking at example 6, this one's a little bit different, but I encourage you to give it a shot and see how well you do. So assuming you have given this a try, let's work through it. So in this case, we have 1/2 plus 2, which is a whole value. It's not a fraction right now, but what we can do is we can make this 2 into a fraction by dividing it by 1. Because 2 divided by 1 is 2, and 2/1 is technically a fraction, so we're not actually changing the value of this 2 here. We're just simply making it into a fraction, and then we can think about adding these two together. Now, if you notice, we don't have common denominators, though. We have a 2 and a 1. And to get a common denominator, I am going to multiply this 1 by 2 because 1 times 2 is 2, and then we have a common denominator of 2. So we're going to have 1 half plus 4 halves. So 1 plus 4 is 5. We're going to put that over 2. So 5 halves is our answer. Looking at example 7, we have 3/4, negative 3/4 plus 1/3. So we have this negative now to worry about. So I encourage you to just pay attention to that and work through it on your own. And assuming you have given it a try, let's go through it. So in this case, we can't divide 4 into 3 evenly or 3 into 4 evenly. So we're going to have case 1 where we multiply these two denominators. So we're going to multiply 4 by 3 and 3. Then we'll multiply 3 by 4. Bring that 4. So 3 times 3 is 9. And then we're going to put that over 3 times 4, which is 12. And then we have this negative here, so we can't forget about that. And I'm going to simply take this negative up here with this negative 9. Because and when I do that, if that's confusing to you, I encourage you to think about it like this. A negative divided by a positive is negative, right? So when we do this, we're not actually changing the value of anything. So this negative we can bring up here. Because if we multiply this entire fraction by negative 1, that negative 1 is on the numerator, if you think about it. But anyways, so from there, we are going to add this here. So 1 times 4 is 4, and 3 times 4 is 12. So negative 9 plus 4 is negative 5. We're going to put that over 12, and that is our answer. Looking at example 8, we have negative 6/4 plus 7. So we can put the 7 over 1 to make it a fraction. And then because we don't have a common denominator, I'm going to multiply this denominator and numerator by 4 to get that common denominator of 4. So we have negative 6/4 plus 7 times 4 is 28. And we're going to put that over 4. So we have a common denominator, so let's add these two together. So this here is a negative 6. Negative 6 plus 28 is going to be 22. So we have 22 over 4. And if you notice here, we have two even numbers. So we can actually reduce this. When we reduce that, we're going to divide both the numerator and denominator by 2. So 22 divided by 2 is 11. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we're left with 11 halves. Looking at example 9, I encourage you to pause the video and work through it together. So in this one, we have case 2. Because we are dividing, we can divide 6 evenly into 12. And to get 6 to 12, I'm going to multiply it by 2. 6 times 2 is 12. So we get 2 times 3, which is 6. 2 times 6 is 12. We're going to add 5 12ths. 6 plus 5 is 11, and we're going to put that over 12. Looking at example 10, 11, and 12, these are a little bit more tricky, but they are only more tricky because we are dealing with mixed numbers and negatives. So I encourage you to pause the video, though, and try it on your own before I work through it. I encourage you to try all 3 of these on your own before we work through it. Now let's work through it together. So let's first here start off by converting this mixed number into a fraction. So we're going to multiply and add. So you get negative 19 sevenths plus 3 times 11 is 33. 33 plus 4 is 37. We're we're going to put that over 11. And then from here, we have to find a common denominator between 7 and 11. In that case, we're going to multiply, let's say, this left fraction here. I'm going to multiply this by 11, this numerator by 11, and then on the bottom here, multiply that by 7. Multiply that by 7 to get us a common value in our denominator. So I'm going to bring that negative. And then negative 19 times 11 is negative 200. Oh, never mind. We already have that negative, so we don't need to say negative 19. So we have 19 times 11, which is 209. And then 11 times 7 is 77. And then 37 times 7 is 259. 11 times 7 is 77. So 209 plus 259 is 50 and over 77. And that's our answer. Looking at example 11, in this case, we are going to have, we don't have any mixed numbers, so we have to convert that. So we just have to look at our denominators and determine what case we're dealing with here. In this case, we're dealing with case 2, where we have to multiply just one denominator by a value to get to the other denominator that we want to. In this case, we can multiply 6 by 3 to get to 18. 6 times 3 is 18. So 3 times 8 is 24. And then 6 times 3 is 18. And then we can't forget this negative that's out here. And then we have 5 over 18. Now, one thing I do want to point out is when we have parentheses around a fraction and we have this negative out here, this is simply saying the same thing as negative 24 over 18, right? Because negative 1 times this fraction is just going to change this fraction into a negative, because a negative times a positive is negative. So I'm just going to rewrite this as negative 24 plus 5 over 18. And negative 24 plus 5 is negative 19. And I'm going to put that over 18. And that's our answer. Looking at example 12, we have this mixed number. So this is one thing that's a little bit confusing. But when we are converting mixed numbers that have a negative attached to it, we are going, while we convert this number into mixed number into a fraction, we don't want to make this a negative 5 and do negative 5 times 6. We want to kind of just like put parentheses around this fraction, but we convert it and pretend like this negative isn't here, because when we do that, we're going to change the actual value of the fraction. And if that doesn't make sense, I encourage you to treat this 5 as a negative 5 and say negative 5 times 6 plus 7, which is wrong, the wrong way to do it, and see how your value changes when you do 5 times 6 plus 7 to see what the difference is. Because if you were to do it the right way, 5 times 6 plus 7, you would realize that, oh, hey, we get about approximately 5 point something. But if you do it the wrong way, you do negative 5 times 6 plus 7, you won't get approximately 5 point something. So that's just, I wanted to point that out. So now let's work through it. So we're going to multiply and then add. So 5 times 6 is 30. 30 plus 7 is 37. So we get negative 37 over 6 plus. And then 4 we can write as 4 over 1. And then here we can multiply this denominator by 6 to get our common denominator. So we have negative 37 over 6. 4 times 6 is 24. Put that over 6. Negative 37 plus 24 is negative 13. We're going to put that over 6. And that is our final answer.